Alexander Whitmore stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office on the 48th floor, gazing out at the Manhattan skyline with a satisfaction that came from years of building an empire from nothing. At 36, he was the CEO of Whitmore Technologies, a company worth billions that he'd founded in his garage 12 years ago. He had everything a man could want: wealth, success, influence, and now, finally, a family. His phone buzzed with a text from his fiancée, Victoria. Emma just said, "Dada." Well, sort of. It sounded more like, "Baba, but I'm counting it. Can't wait for you to get home tonight. Love you." Alexander smiled, his heart swelling with an emotion he'd never experienced before becoming a father. His 6-month-old daughter. The tiny human who had completely transformed his world and made him understand what people meant when they said a child changes everything. He texted back, "That's amazing. I'll be home by 6. Can't wait to hear it myself. Love you both." Alexander's path to fatherhood had been unconventional, to say the least. He'd met Victoria Ashford 2 years ago at a charity gala. She was a junior executive at a marketing firm, beautiful and ambitious, with honey blonde hair and striking green eyes. She'd approached him with a business proposal. Her firm wanted to handle Whitmore Technologies' rebranding campaign, and he'd been impressed by her confidence and intelligence. Their professional relationship had quickly turned personal. Within 6 months, they were dating exclusively. Within a year, Victoria had moved into his penthouse. She'd been everything he thought he wanted in a partner: sophisticated, driven, comfortable in his world of wealth and high-stakes business dealings. Then, 18 months into their relationship, Victoria had come to him with unexpected news and an unusual proposition. "I'm not pregnant," she'd said quickly, seeing the alarm on his face. "But I want to talk to you about something important. About our future." They'd been sitting in his living room, the city lights twinkling below them, and Alexander had felt a mixture of relief and curiosity. "I know we've talked about marriage," Victoria had continued, "and I know we've both said we want children eventually. But Alexander, I need to be honest with you. I don't want to be pregnant. The thought of pregnancy terrifies me. The physical changes, the health risks, being out of commission for months. I've seen what it did to my sister and I can't." Alexander had listened, surprised but trying to be understanding. "But I do want us to have a family," Victoria had said. "I want us to have a child together. So I have a proposal. What if we used a surrogate?" Alexander had never considered surrogacy before, but as Victoria explained her reasoning, it had started to make sense. They could have a biological child without Victoria having to go through pregnancy. They could carefully select a healthy surrogate, ensure the best medical care, and still have the family they both wanted. "I know it's unconventional," Victoria had said, "but we're not conventional people. We're successful, we have resources, and we can afford to do this the way that works best for us. What do you think?" After several long conversations and extensive research, Alexander had agreed. They'd gone through a reputable surrogacy agency, reviewed profiles, conducted interviews, and selected a surrogate named Jennifer, a healthy 30-year-old mother of 2 who'd been a surrogate once before. The process had been clinical and expensive, but 9 months later, Emma Grace Whitmore had come into the world. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfect, beautiful baby girl. Alexander had been in the delivery room, had cut the umbilical cord, had held his daughter within minutes of her birth. The love he'd felt in that moment had been overwhelming, immediate, and all-consuming. Victoria, true to her word, had been there too, but her role had been more detached. She'd held Emma, cooed at her appropriately, but there had been none of the fierce maternal bonding Alexander had expected. He'd attributed it to the unusual circumstances of Emma's birth. Victoria hadn't carried Emma, hadn't experienced the hormonal changes of pregnancy, hadn't had that physical connection. He'd told himself that maternal feelings would develop over time. That had been 6 months ago. And while Victoria was attentive and appropriate with Emma, feeding her bottles, changing diapers when necessary, posting adorable photos on social media, Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. There was a distance between Victoria and Emma, a lack of warmth that troubled him even as he tried to convince himself he was imagining it. "Mr. Whitmore?" His assistant, Patricia, knocked on his office door. "Your 4 o'clock is here." Alexander turned from the window, pushing thoughts of his family aside. "Send them in." The afternoon passed in a blur of meetings and conference calls. By the time Alexander wrapped up his last call, it was already 5:45 p.m. He gathered his things quickly, eager to get home to Emma. These days, he found himself rushing home every evening, wanting to maximize every moment with his daughter. She was growing so fast, every day brought new developments, new sounds, new expressions. The drive home to his penthouse on the Upper East Side took 20 minutes in rush hour traffic. Alexander used the time to call his mother, Catherine, who'd been asking to visit again. "Mom, of course you can come see Emma this weekend," Alexander said. "But I should warn you, Victoria's been stressed lately. The wedding planning is overwhelming her." "Alexander," his mother said in that tone that meant she was about to say something he didn't want to hear. "Are you sure about this wedding? About Victoria?" "Mom, we've been through this." I know. But darling, I've been watching Victoria with Emma, and I just don't see the connection. That girl is going through the motions, but there's no real love there. No real bond." "She's adjusting," Alexander said defensively. "Not every woman has instant maternal instincts. She didn't carry Emma, that makes it different." "I didn't carry you either," Catherine said quietly. Alexander fell silent. He'd been adopted as an infant, something his mother had always been open about. Catherine and his late father had adopted him when they couldn't have biological children, and they'd loved him fiercely and completely from day one. "That's different," Alexander finally said. "You and Dad chose adoption. You went into it wanting to be parents." "And Victoria didn't want to be a mother?" Catherine asked pointedly. "Because that's what worries me, Alexander. I think Victoria wanted to please you, wanted to keep you, so she agreed to have a child. But wanting to make your partner happy is not the same as wanting to be a parent." "You don't know her like I do," Alexander said, though doubt was creeping into his voice. "Maybe not. But I know what love looks like. And when I see Victoria with Emma, I don't see love. I see obligation. Promise me you'll pay attention, Alexander. Promise me you'll make sure Emma is truly loved and cared for." "Of course she is," Alexander said. "I love her more than anything." "I know you do, sweetheart. But Emma needs more than just your love. She needs her mother's love too." They said goodbye, and Alexander sat in traffic feeling unsettled. His mother's words had struck a chord because they echoed his own unspoken concerns. But he pushed the doubts aside. Victoria was good with Emma. Maybe not warmly maternal, but competent and caring. That was enough, wasn't it? Alexander arrived home at 6:15 p.m., letting himself into the penthouse quietly. He expected to hear Emma's babbling or Victoria's voice, but the apartment was strangely silent. "Victoria?" he called out. "I'm home." "In the nursery," Victoria called back, her voice strained. Alexander walked down the hallway toward Emma's nursery, a beautifully decorated room in soft pinks and whites that had cost more to furnish than most people's annual salary. As he approached, he could hear Emma crying, not her usual fussy cry, but a distressed wail that made his heart clench. He pushed open the door to find Victoria standing in the middle of the nursery, her arms crossed, while Emma screamed in her crib. Victoria's face was flushed with frustration, her carefully styled hair disheveled. "What's wrong?" Alexander asked, immediately moving to the crib to pick up Emma. The moment he lifted her, his daughter pressed her face against his shoulder, her cries subsiding to hiccuping sobs. "She's been crying for an hour," Victoria said, her voice tight. "Nothing I do makes her stop. I've fed her, changed her, tried to rock her, she just won't stop crying." Alexander felt Emma's forehead. She was warm but not feverish. He checked her diaper. Click. He looked at Victoria. "Did you try the white noise machine? Sometimes that calms her down." "Of course I tried the white noise machine," Victoria snapped. "I tried everything, Alexander. She just doesn't like me. She never has." "That's not true." "It is true." Victoria's voice rose. "She cries whenever I pick her up. She calms down the second you walk in the room. Even the nanny has better luck with her than I do. It's like she knows I'm not her real mother, Victoria, you are her real mother, Alexander said firmly, still rocking Emma gently. Biology doesn't determine that. Love does. Victoria laughed bitterly. Alexander, I'm trying. I'm really trying. But this whole motherhood thing doesn't come naturally to me the way it does to you. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Don't say that, Alexander said, alarmed. You're tired, that's all. Why don't you go take a bath, relax? I've got Emma. Victoria looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her eyes. Then she nodded and left the nursery without another word. Alexander sat in the rocking chair with Emma, who had now settled completely, her small hand gripping his shirt, her breathing evening out as she dozed. He looked down at his daughter's perfect face and felt the familiar surge of protective love. But beneath it was a growing worry that his mother and his own instincts were right. Something was wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, Alexander found himself paying closer attention to Victoria's interactions with Emma. What he saw troubled him deeply. Victoria was never cruel or neglectful, nothing that would raise obvious red flags. But she was cold, distant, going through the motions of childcare without any real warmth or affection. When Emma reached for Victoria, Victoria would pick her up with the enthusiasm someone might show for picking up a bag of groceries. When Emma babbled and smiled at her, Victoria would smile back, but the smile never reached her eyes. And most tellingly, Victoria found excuses to minimize her time alone with Emma. I have a work call, she'd say when the nanny left for the day. I have a headache, she'd claim when Alexander suggested she give Emma her evening bottle. I'm meeting the wedding planner, she'd explain when Alexander asked if she wanted to take Emma to the park. Alexander tried to tell himself he was being paranoid, but he couldn't shake his growing unease. Then came the incident that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening. The nanny, Maria, had left at 5 p.m. as usual. Victoria had said she needed to run to a boutique to pick up shoes for an upcoming event and would be back by 6:30. Alexander had a conference call with Tokyo that couldn't be rescheduled, so Victoria had agreed to take Emma with her. Except when Alexander's call ended at 6 o'clock and he went looking for his daughter, the apartment was silent. No Victoria. No Emma. He called Victoria's cell phone. It went to voicemail. He texted her, "Where are you? I thought you'd be back by now." No response. By 6:45, Alexander was worried. By 7 o'clock, he was calling Victoria repeatedly. By 7:30, he was considering calling the police. Finally, at 7:45, he heard the front door open. Alexander rushed to the foyer to find Victoria walking in with Emma in her carrier, looking harried and guilty. "Where the hell have you been?" Alexander demanded, his voice shaking with anger and relief. "I've been calling you for over an hour." "My phone died," Victoria said, not meeting his eyes. "And I ran into an old friend at the boutique. We went for coffee and I lost track of time." "You lost track of time?" Alexander repeated incredulously. "For almost 3 hours? With our 6-month-old daughter?" "She was fine, Alexander. She slept most of the time." Alexander took the carrier from Victoria and looked at Emma, who was indeed sleeping peacefully. But something about Victoria's story didn't add up. "What boutique? Where did you go for coffee?" "What is this, an interrogation?" Victoria's voice turned defensive. "I told you. I ran into a friend, we got coffee, I lost track of time. I'm sorry I worried you, but Emma is fine. Nothing happened." "Victoria, you can't just disappear with our baby for 3 hours without telling me where you are." "I didn't disappear. My phone died. What did you want me to do?" They argued for another 10 minutes before Victoria stormed off to their bedroom, leaving Alexander alone with Emma. As he carefully lifted his sleeping daughter from the carrier, he noticed something. Her outfit was different from the one she'd been wearing when Victoria left. Alexander's heart began to pound. He checked Emma's diaper bag. Inside was a onesie with spit-up stains, presumably the outfit Emma had been wearing earlier. But why would Victoria have changed Emma's clothes during a shopping trip? That night, after Victoria had gone to sleep, Alexander lay awake thinking. Something was wrong. He couldn't pinpoint exactly what, but his instincts were screaming that Victoria was lying about something. The question was, what? The next morning, Alexander made a decision. He called a security company that specialized in discreet surveillance. I need cameras installed in my home, he told the technician. Small, hidden, high quality. I need to be able to monitor them remotely from my phone. Of course, Mr. Whitmore. May I ask what areas of the home you'd like to monitor? Alexander hesitated. What he was considering felt like a violation of privacy, a breach of trust. But then he thought about Emma, about Victoria's coldness, about the 3 missing hours, about his mother's warnings. The nursery, he said finally. The living room. The kitchen. Anywhere my daughter might be. And your wife? The technician asked. Should we inform her of the installation? Fiancée, Alexander corrected. No. This needs to be completely confidential. Can you install them discreetly? When she's not home. There was a pause. Mr. Whitmore, I have to advise you that recording someone without their knowledge may have legal implications depending on your jurisdiction and intent. This is my home, my child, and I'm concerned about her safety, Alexander said firmly. I'm not doing anything illegal. I just want to make sure my daughter is being properly cared for. Understood. We can have a team there tomorrow afternoon if you can ensure the residence is empty. The next day, Alexander arranged for Victoria to attend a spa day that he'd booked for her as a surprise. She'd been delighted, kissing him on the cheek and thanking him for being so thoughtful. While she was being pampered, the security team installed 6 tiny cameras throughout the penthouse, in the nursery, living room, kitchen, and hallway. They're completely invisible, the lead technician assured Alexander. Even if she's looking for them, she won't find them. And you can access the live feeds and recordings from your phone anytime, anywhere. Everything is stored on a secure cloud server. Thank you, Alexander said, feeling both relieved and guilty. This stays confidential, correct? Absolutely, Mr. Whitmore. We never discuss our clients or their installations with anyone. That evening, Alexander tested the system from his office. He pulled up the app on his phone and could see live feeds from all 6 cameras. In the nursery, Maria was changing Emma's diaper while singing softly in Spanish. In the kitchen, Victoria was pouring herself a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone. Everything looked normal and mundane. Alexander felt foolish. What was he expecting to find? Victoria wasn't abusing Emma or neglecting her. She was just distant. Cold. That wasn't a crime. Maybe he was overreacting. Maybe his mother had planted seeds of doubt that had grown into full-blown paranoia. He considered deleting the app, having the cameras removed. But something stopped him. A nagging feeling that he needed to wait, to watch, to understand what was really happening in his home when he wasn't there. For the next week, Alexander checked the cameras periodically, usually during breaks between meetings or on his commute home. He watched Maria playing with Emma, singing to her, feeding her. He watched Victoria moving through the apartment, always on her phone, rarely engaging with Emma unless Maria specifically asked her to. Then, on a Friday afternoon, Alexander checked the cameras and saw something that made his blood run cold. It was 2 p.m. Maria had the day off, her daughter had a doctor's appointment. Victoria had assured Alexander she could handle watching Emma for a few hours. It's fine, she'd said that morning. I can manage my own daughter for an afternoon. Alexander pulled up the nursery camera. Emma was awake in her crib, babbling happily. He switched to the living room camera. Victoria was sitting on the couch, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice raised in frustration. Alexander turned up the volume on his phone. I don't care, Derek, Victoria was saying. I told you I can't keep doing this. It's too risky. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Because I'm careful, that's why. Look, I only agreed to this whole baby thing because you said it would secure my future with him. You said once we were married, once the baby was here, I'd have access to everything. Alexander's hand tightened on his phone. Who is Derek? What did Victoria agree to? Victoria continued, but you didn't tell me how much I'd have to actually pretend to care about the kid. Do you know how exhausting it is? Pretending to be a loving mother when all I want is to hand her off to the nanny and forget she exists? I know the payout will be worth it. 5 years of marriage, 1 kid, then a divorce that leaves me set for life. That's the plan. But Derek, I don't know if I can last 5 years of this. The kid cries constantly, Alexander is getting suspicious, and his mother hates me. Alexander felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. He couldn't breathe. His vision blurred. Everything Victoria was saying, it was all calculated. The relationship, the agreement to have a child, even the surrogacy suggestion. All of it had been a long con to secure access to his wealth. And Emma, his precious daughter. Victoria saw her as nothing more than a tool, a means to an end. Look, I have to go, Victoria said into the phone. The baby's probably going to start screaming any second, and I should at least pretend to care. Yeah, dinner tomorrow night. We can talk more then. Love you too. Victoria hung up and sat there for a moment, staring at nothing. Then she sighed heavily and stood up. Alexander switched back to the nursery camera, his heart pounding. Victoria walked into the nursery. Emma saw her and smiled, reaching out her little arms. Victoria looked at Emma with an expression of such cold disdain that Alexander felt tears spring to his eyes. You need to stop crying so much, Victoria said flatly. You're making this whole thing so much harder than it needs to be. Emma, not understanding the words but perhaps sensing the tone, started to fuss. Oh, don't start, Victoria snapped. She checked her watch. Maria will be back in an hour. I just need you to be quiet until then. Emma's fussing escalated to crying. Victoria stood there, making no move to pick her up or comfort her. Fine. Cry then, Victoria said. She pulled out her phone and left the nursery, closing the door behind her. Alexander watched in horror as his 6-month-old daughter cried alone in her crib while Victoria sat in the living room scrolling through Instagram, completely unconcerned. 10 minutes passed. 15. 20. Emma's cries became desperate, the kind of crying that indicated real distress. Still, Victoria didn't move. Finally, after 25 minutes of listening to Emma scream, Victoria sighed, stood up, and walked back to the nursery. She picked Emma up roughly, jostling her more than necessary. Happy now? Victoria said coldly. You're such a needy little thing. Just like your father said you'd be. She carried Emma to the changing table, changed her diaper with mechanical efficiency, then put her back in the crib without any soothing or comforting. Stay quiet, Victoria ordered as if Emma could understand. I have things to do. She left the nursery again, and Emma, exhausted from crying, eventually fell into a fitful sleep. Alexander sat in his office, shaking with rage and heartbreak. His phone was still clutched in his hand, the camera feed still playing. He wanted to vomit. He wanted to scream. He wanted to drive home immediately and throw Victoria out of his penthouse, out of his life, away from his daughter forever. But beneath the rage was calculation. Victoria had just admitted to planning to divorce him, to using their child as leverage for financial gain. If he confronted her now, impulsively, she could claim he was being paranoid, could deny everything, could possibly even try to sue for custody of Emma out of spite. He needed to be smart about this. He needed evidence, which he now had. He needed legal counsel. He needed a plan to protect Emma and ensure Victoria never had access to her again. Alexander took several deep breaths, forcing himself to calm down. Then he made a phone call. David? It's Alexander Whitmore. I need to see you immediately. It's about my fiancée and my daughter. Something's happened, and I need legal advice. Can you meet me in an hour? David Morrison was Alexander's attorney, a sharp legal mind who'd helped Alexander navigate countless business deals. He'd also handled several high-profile divorce cases for Alexander's friends and associates. Of course, Alexander. Come to my office. Whatever you need. Alexander grabbed his jacket and headed out, telling Patricia he was taking the rest of the day off. As he drove to David's office, his mind raced. He thought about every interaction he'd witnessed between Victoria and Emma. All the signs had been there. The coldness, the distance, the excuses. He'd seen them but convinced himself he was being paranoid, that he was expecting too much too soon. But it wasn't paranoia. It was intuition. And he should have trusted it sooner. In David's office, Alexander showed him the video footage. David watched in silence, his expression growing grimmer with each passing moment. "This is bad, Alexander," David said finally. "This woman has admitted she entered into this relationship fraudulently with the intent to divorce you for financial gain. She's demonstrated clear emotional neglect of your child. And she's having an affair, or at minimum, an inappropriate relationship with someone named Derek. What are my options?" Alexander asked. "I want her out of my life and away from Emma immediately." "Legally, it's complicated," David said carefully. "Victoria isn't Emma's biological mother. You used a surrogate. But has Victoria legally adopted Emma? Or is she listed on the birth certificate as the mother?" Alexander felt his stomach drop. "She's on the birth certificate. We used my sperm and an egg donor, and Victoria's name is listed as the mother. The surrogate relinquished all parental rights. Victoria and I are both Emma's legal parents." David nodded grimly. "Then we have a problem. Even though Victoria didn't carry Emma and even though she's clearly unfit, she has legal parental rights. You can't just kick her out and keep her from Emma without going through proper legal channels. If you do, she could claim parental alienation, could possibly even get temporary custody while the courts sort it out. So what do I do?" Alexander felt desperate. "I can't leave Emma with her. You saw what she did. She let a 6-month-old cry alone for 25 minutes. That's neglect." "And we'll use that," David assured him. "Here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to go home and act completely normal. Don't let Victoria know you suspect anything. Continue checking the cameras and documenting everything. Every moment of neglect, every phone call, everything. Build an airtight case." "How long will that take?" "A few weeks at minimum. Maybe a month. I know that's hard to hear, but Alexander, if we move too fast, if we tip her off, she'll lawyer up and make this messy. We need overwhelming evidence before we make our move." "And Emma? I'm just supposed to leave her with someone who sees her as a paycheck?" "You'll be there," David said. "And you have Maria, the nanny. Victoria isn't abusing Emma, she's neglecting her emotionally, which is terrible but not immediately dangerous. Can you arrange for Maria to be there more often? Maybe have her stay overnight sometimes?" Alexander nodded slowly. "I can do that. Maria has been asking about more hours anyway. But we'll document everything, and when we have enough, we'll file for emergency custody based on emotional neglect and fraud. We'll argue that Victoria entered into this relationship in parenthood under false pretenses and that she's demonstrated a pattern of emotionally neglecting Emma. With the video evidence, we should be able to get her parental rights terminated." "Should." Alexander latched onto the word. "Not will." David sighed. "Family court is unpredictable, Alexander. Judges are usually reluctant to terminate parental rights completely. But given the circumstances, the fraud, the admitted plan to divorce for financial gain, the documented neglect, I think we have a strong case. Especially since you have the financial means to provide Emma with everything she needs and Victoria's interest in Emma is purely mercenary." Alexander nodded, feeling slightly better. "I'll document everything. But David, if I see Emma in any danger, if Victoria does anything that puts her at risk, I'm not waiting for a court order. I'll grab my daughter and deal with the legal consequences later." "I understand," David said. "But it won't come to that. We'll move as quickly as we can while still building a solid case. Just hold on a little longer, and we'll get Emma away from Victoria permanently." That evening, Alexander returned home and did the hardest thing he'd ever done in his life. He pretended everything was normal. He kissed Victoria hello, asked about her day, played with Emma, and acted like his entire world hadn't just been shattered. But inside, he was dying. Because now he knew the truth. The woman he'd planned to marry, the woman he'd entrusted with his daughter's care, was a fraud. She didn't love him. She didn't love Emma. She was playing a long game for money, and his precious daughter was just a pawn. As Alexander put Emma to bed that night, holding her close and breathing in her baby scent, he made a silent promise. "I'm going to protect you," he whispered. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I'm going to make sure you're safe and loved. You deserve so much better than this. And I swear to you, Emma, you're going to have it." Emma yawned and snuggled against his chest, trusting and innocent, with no idea of the storm that was coming. But Alexander knew, and he was ready to fight. Over the next 3 weeks, Alexander became two people. During the day, he was the loving fiancé and devoted father, going through the motions of his engagement to Victoria while carefully documenting every moment of her neglect and deception. But at night, when Victoria was asleep, he was someone else, a man methodically building a case to destroy the woman sleeping beside him. The camera footage was damning. Alexander watched hours of recordings, his heart breaking with each new revelation. He watched Victoria ignore Emma's cries. He watched her roughly handle his daughter during diaper changes. He watched her leave Emma alone in rooms for extended periods while she scrolled through her phone or talked to this mysterious Derek. And he listened. The cameras had audio, and Victoria, believing herself unobserved, talked freely on the phone with Derek. Through these conversations, Alexander pieced together the full scope of her betrayal. Derek Ashford was Victoria's ex-boyfriend from college. They'd dated for 3 years before breaking up when Derek's business ventures failed and he declared bankruptcy. Victoria had left him for greener pastures, specifically for wealthy men who could provide the lifestyle she craved. But she and Derek had never really ended things. They'd maintained contact throughout Victoria's subsequent relationships, including her relationship with Alexander. And when Victoria met Alexander, a billionaire tech CEO, Derek had seen an opportunity. "You need to lock this down," Alexander heard Derek say on one recorded phone call. "This guy is worth billions. If you play this right, you'll never have to work again." "I'm trying," Victoria had responded. "But he's not proposing. He keeps saying he wants to focus on building the business." "Then give him a reason to propose," Derek had suggested. "These family man types can't resist the idea of legacy. Tell him you want kids. Hell, offer to use a surrogate if you have to. Just get him to put a ring on it and get you pregnant. Once you have his kid, you're set." And that's exactly what Victoria had done. She'd suggested surrogacy, knowing Alexander wanted children but also knowing she had no interest in being pregnant. She'd played the role of excited mother-to-be throughout the pregnancy. She'd been present at Emma's birth, had taken the obligatory photos, had posted on social media about the blessing of motherhood. All of it had been an act. A calculated performance designed to secure her financial future. The phone calls continued throughout the 3 weeks Alexander was gathering evidence. He listened as Victoria complained about Emma's crying, about the demands of childcare, about how exhausting it was to pretend to be a loving mother. "Only 4.5 more years," Derek would remind her. "Then you can divorce him, take half his wealth, get child support for the kid you don't even want, and we can finally be together properly." "I should get more than half," Victoria would respond. "I'm raising his kid. That should count for something." She wasn't raising Emma. Maria was. Alexander was. Victoria was simply occupying space in Emma's life, going through the minimum motions required to maintain her facade. But the worst part wasn't the mercenary attitude toward the marriage or even the calculated plan to divorce. The worst part was how Victoria talked about Emma herself. "The kid is so needy," Victoria complained on one call. "Constant crying, constant demands for attention. I don't know how people do this parent thing willingly. If I'd known it would be this annoying, I might have reconsidered the whole plan." "But she's cute, right?" Derek had asked. "I saw the photos you posted. She's a cute kid." "I guess," Victoria said dismissively. "She looks like Alexander. Which is good, I suppose. Less chance of anyone questioning paternity. But honestly, Derek, I feel nothing when I look at her. Nothing. Everyone talks about this overwhelming love you feel for your child, this instant connection. I don't have that. I look at her and all I see is a job I have to do for 4 more years." Alexander had to stop the playback at that point. He'd sat in his office bathroom and cried, overwhelmed by rage and grief. His daughter deserved so much better than this. Emma deserved a mother who looked at her with love, who wanted to comfort her when she cried, who saw her as a blessing rather than a burden. He'd composed himself and returned to his desk, more determined than ever to remove Victoria from their lives. David, his attorney, reviewed the footage weekly. "This is excellent," David would say, though his expression was always grim. I mean, it's horrifying, but legally, it's excellent. We have clear evidence of emotional neglect, of fraud, of Victoria's true intentions. No judge is going to grant her custody or significant parental rights once they see this. When can we move? Alexander would ask each time. Soon, David would promise. We want to establish a clear pattern. Another week, maybe 2. Then we'll file for emergency custody and move to terminate her parental rights. So Alexander waited. He increased Maria's hours to 6 days a week, ensuring Emma was rarely alone with Victoria. He came home early from work whenever possible. He took Emma to his office on weekends, letting her nap in the portable crib he'd set up in the corner of his office while he worked. And he watched Victoria become increasingly careless. She was so confident in her deception, so certain Alexander suspected nothing, that she stopped even pretending when she thought he wasn't looking. One evening, Alexander came home early, deliberately, after checking the cameras and seeing Victoria on the phone with Derek. He walked in quietly and heard Victoria in the kitchen. So tired of this, she was saying. Every day the same routine. Feed the baby, change the baby, pretend to care about the baby. I'm so bored, Derek. When can we go somewhere? Just the 2 of us? Alexander stepped into the kitchen. Go somewhere? Like where? Victoria spun around, her face paling as she saw him. She recovered quickly, her expression shifting to a bright smile. Alexander, I didn't hear you come in. I was just talking to my friend Sarah about how we never get couple time anymore. How we should plan a getaway soon. Sarah, Alexander repeated flatly. That's funny, because I heard you say Derek. Victoria's smile faltered for just a moment. Did I? I meant Sarah. I've been so tired lately, I'm mixing up names. Alexander looked at her, really looked at her, and wondered how he'd ever thought he loved this woman. Had she always been this transparently fake? Or had he been blinded by her beauty and the illusion of shared ambitions? Where's Emma? He asked. Napping in the nursery. She's been fussy all day. Victoria poured herself a glass of wine, her hands slightly shaky. Teething, I think. Maria had to leave early, her daughter's sick, so I've been handling Emma solo. It's been exhausting. Alexander walked to the nursery, checking the camera footage on his phone as he went. Emma had been crying for 40 minutes before finally crying herself to sleep. Victoria had been on the phone with Derek the entire time, ignoring their daughter's distress. He found Emma asleep in her crib, her face blotchy and tear-stained, her tiny fists clenched. Alexander's heart shattered. He gently picked her up, and Emma stirred, her eyes opening. When she saw her father, she let out a small whimper and buried her face in his neck. It's okay, baby girl, Alexander whispered, holding her close. Daddy's here. Daddy's always going to be here. He carried Emma back to the living room, where Victoria was now curled on the couch with her wine, scrolling through her phone. She was crying, Alexander said, his voice carefully controlled. For a long time, from the looks of it. Victoria glanced up. Was she? I didn't hear anything. I had my headphones in for my call with Sarah. The lie was so casual, so effortless. Alexander felt his control slipping. Victoria, we need to talk about this. About how you're handling things with Emma. I'm worried. Worried about what? Victoria's tone turned defensive. I'm doing my best, Alexander. You try taking care of a baby alone all day while also trying to plan a wedding and maintain some semblance of a career. It's not easy. I know it's not easy. That's why I'm saying maybe we need more help. Maybe Maria should move in full-time, or we should hire a night nurse. So you can criticize my parenting even more? Victoria stood up, her voice rising. That's what this is about, isn't it? You think I'm not good enough. You and your mother both. I see the way she looks at me when she visits, like I'm some kind of monster for not falling all over myself with maternal bliss every second of every day. This isn't about my mother. It's always about your mother. She's never liked me, never thought I was good enough for you. And now she's poisoning you against me too. Emma started crying at the raised voices. Alexander automatically began rocking her, soothing her. Victoria, please. You're upsetting Emma. I'm upsetting her? She cries constantly. That's what babies do. Maybe if you didn't come home and immediately question everything I do, I wouldn't be so stressed and she'd sense that and cry less. It was textbook manipulation, turning everything around to make herself the victim. Alexander had seen her do it in business contexts before: deflect blame, play the victim, make the other person doubt their own perceptions. He just never realized she was doing it to him too. "You're right," Alexander said, forcing himself to de-escalate. "I'm sorry. You've had a hard day. Why don't you go relax? I've got Emma." Victoria studied him suspiciously, perhaps sensing something off in his quick capitulation. But then she shrugged. "Fine. I'm meeting some friends for dinner anyway. I should get ready." "Friends?" Alexander asked. "Which friends?" "Just some girls from my old firm. We're catching up." Another lie. Alexander had checked the cameras enough times to know that Victoria's girls' nights were actually dinners with Derek at expensive restaurants, dinners she charged to the credit card Alexander had given her. "Have fun," Alexander said evenly. "I'll put Emma to bed." After Victoria left, Alexander sat with Emma in the rocking chair in her nursery. His daughter had calmed down and was now playing with his fingers, gurgling happily. She was so innocent, so trusting. She had no idea that the woman she called Mama, or would, once she could talk, didn't love her at all. "I'm going to fix this," Alexander promised Emma. "Very soon. I promise." His phone buzzed with a text from David. "We have enough. Let's meet tomorrow morning and discuss next steps. Bring the latest footage." Alexander felt relief and dread in equal measure. It was time. The next morning, Alexander told Victoria he had early meetings and left the penthouse with Emma, telling Victoria that Maria would be there by 8 a.m. Instead, he drove straight to David's office with Emma in her car seat, her diaper bag packed with everything she'd need for the day. In David's conference room, Alexander spread out 3 weeks' worth of documented evidence. Video footage, audio recordings, screenshots of credit card statements showing Victoria's dinners with Derek, records of the times Victoria had left Emma crying for extended periods. Everything. David reviewed it all, taking notes. "This is comprehensive, Alexander. Any judge who sees this will be appalled. We have fraud, infidelity, emotional neglect, and a clear statement of intent to marry you solely for financial gain." "So what happens now?" Alexander asked, holding Emma, who was chewing on a teething ring. "Now, we file for emergency custody and for termination of Victoria's parental rights. Given the evidence, I'm confident we'll get the emergency custody order today or tomorrow. Victoria will be required to leave the residence immediately, and she'll have no contact with Emma pending a full hearing." "And the engagement?" "The wedding? Legally, that's separate. You can end the engagement whenever you want. She might try to sue for breach of promise, but given her fraudulent intent, I don't think she'd succeed. More likely, once she realizes we have all this evidence, she'll just want to negotiate a settlement to avoid criminal fraud charges." "Criminal charges?" Alexander looked up sharply. "She entered into a binding relationship under false pretenses with intent to defraud you of money and assets. That could potentially be prosecuted as fraud. I doubt you'd want to put her in prison. It would be messy and public, but the threat of it will be useful in negotiations." Alexander thought about Victoria sitting in a jail cell and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret. She'd planned to use his daughter as a pawn in a financial scheme. She'd neglected Emma emotionally for months. She deserved consequences. "Let's focus on Emma first," Alexander said. "Getting full custody, terminating Victoria's rights. After that, we can discuss what to do about Victoria herself." "Agreed. I'll file the emergency petition this morning. Be prepared. Once Victoria is served with papers, things are going to get ugly. She'll be angry, she'll make accusations, she might try to turn this around on you. You need to stay calm and let me handle it." "I can do that," Alexander said. "As long as Emma is safe." "Emma will be safe," David promised. "We'll make sure of it." At 2 p.m. that afternoon, while Victoria was getting her nails done, 2 process servers arrived at the salon and handed her a manila envelope. Alexander watched it happen on the Find My Phone app. He'd long ago convinced Victoria to share her location with him, for safety. He saw her location stay stationary for several minutes. Then suddenly she was moving fast. Driving. Heading toward the penthouse. Alexander's phone rang. Victoria. He declined the call. She called again. And again. And again. Finally, Alexander answered. Hello, Victoria. What the fuck did you do? Victoria screamed. Emergency custody? Termination of parental rights? Are you insane? I'm protecting my daughter, Alexander said calmly, from someone who sees her as a paycheck instead of a person. There was a shocked silence. What are you talking about? I know everything, Victoria. I know about Derek. I know about your plan to divorce me after 5 years. I know you never wanted Emma, that you only agreed to have a child to secure your financial future. I know you've been neglecting her, ignoring her, treating her like a burden. I have proof of all of it. You're lying, Victoria said, but her voice shook. You're making things up because your mother convinced you I'm not good enough. I have video footage, Alexander interrupted. And audio recordings. 3 weeks worth. Every phone call with Derek. Every time you left Emma crying alone. Every moment of neglect. Every admission that you're only in this relationship for money. Another silence, longer this time. When Victoria spoke again, her voice had changed, less angry, more calculating. Video footage? You've been spying on me? Recording me without my consent? That's illegal, Alexander. Anything you recorded can't be used in court. Actually, it can, Alexander said. I was recording my home to ensure my daughter's safety. That's perfectly legal. And everything you said and did was captured in the process. Your lawyer will explain that to you. My lawyer, Victoria repeated. Alexander, please. Don't do this. We can work this out. I know I haven't been the perfect mother, but I'm trying. Postpartum depression is real, and I've been struggling. You didn't give birth to Emma, Alexander said flatly. You can't have postpartum depression. Stop lying. Adoptive mothers can experience similar hormonal and emotional issues. Victoria, stop. Just stop. I've heard you on the phone with Derek. I've heard you say you feel nothing when you look at Emma. I've heard you counting down the years until you can divorce me and take half my money. I've watched you let our 6-month-old daughter cry alone for 45 minutes while you talk to your boyfriend. You can't manipulate your way out of this. Alexander, Victoria's voice cracked. And for a moment, Alexander wondered if she was actually upset or if this was just another performance. Please. I love you. I love Emma. I know I've made mistakes, but we can fix this. Couples therapy, parenting classes, whatever you want. Just don't take Emma away from me. You never wanted Emma in the first place, Alexander said quietly. And Emma deserves better than a mother who has to be threatened with legal action to pretend to care about her. You bastard, Victoria hissed, the tears in her voice vanishing instantly. You think you can just throw me away? After everything I've done? After 2 years of my life invested in you? Invested, Alexander repeated. Interesting choice of words. You know what I mean. I've been your partner, your fiancée, the mother of your child. You've been none of those things authentically, Alexander said. You've been playing a role. And now the show is over. The court order says you need to vacate the penthouse by 6 p.m. today. Maria is there now, packing your belongings. You can collect them at the front desk of the building. You're kicking me out? Just like that? I have nowhere to go. I'm sure Derek will take you in, Alexander said. After all, you told him you love him just last night. I'm sure he'll be happy to finally have you full-time. How dare you? Goodbye, Victoria. My attorney will be in touch about the custody hearing. I suggest you get a good lawyer. You're going to need one. Alexander hung up before Victoria could respond. His hands were shaking, adrenaline coursing through his body. He'd just blown up his engagement, his planned wedding, his daughter's family structure. But he'd also just freed Emma from a toxic situation. Emma, who'd been playing with blocks on a blanket spread on David's conference room floor, looked up at her father and smiled. Dada, she said clearly. Alexander felt tears spring to his eyes. That's right, baby girl. Dada. And Dada is going to make sure you're always loved and protected. Over the next 2 weeks, Alexander's life became a whirlwind of legal proceedings, emergency hearings, and character assassination attempts from Victoria's legal team. Victoria hired a high-powered attorney who immediately went on the offensive. They claimed Alexander was mentally unstable, that he'd become irrationally paranoid and controlling. They argued that the secret recordings were evidence of his unstable mind, not Victoria's unfitness as a mother. They portrayed Victoria as a devoted mother being torn from her child by a vindictive billionaire who couldn't handle not having complete control. But David had prepared for this. In the emergency custody hearing, he played selected footage for the judge, Victoria on the phone with Derek discussing her 5-year plan, Victoria leaving Emma to cry alone for extended periods, Victoria expressing that she felt nothing when she looked at her daughter. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judith Morrison, watched the footage with an increasingly disturbed expression. "Ms. Ashford," Judge Morrison said when the video ended, "do you deny that this is you in this footage?" Victoria's lawyer started to speak, but Judge Morrison held up a hand. "I asked Ms. Ashford." Victoria, sitting at the defendant's table looking immaculate in a designer suit, shook her head. "I don't deny it's me. But Your Honor, those recordings were taken without my knowledge or consent. And they're taken out of context." "Context?" Judge Morrison repeated. "What context would make it acceptable to leave a 6-month-old infant crying alone for 45 minutes? I was overwhelmed," Victoria said. "I was having a hard day. Every parent has moments when they need to step away." "For 45 minutes?" Judge Morrison's voice was ice. "Ms. Ashford, I've reviewed all the footage Mr. Whitmore's attorney submitted. This isn't one bad day. This is a pattern of emotional neglect spanning weeks. Combined with your recorded statements about your intentions regarding this relationship and this child, I have serious concerns about your fitness as a parent." "Your Honor," Victoria's attorney interjected, "my client made some unfortunate statements in private conversations. But statements aren't actions. She hasn't harmed this child. She's never been physically abusive." "Emotional neglect is harm," Judge Morrison said sharply. "And Ms. Ashford's own words indicate she has no genuine parental attachment to this child. She views the child as a means to financial security, nothing more." The judge looked down at her notes, then back at Victoria. "Ms. Ashford, did you enter into this relationship with Mr. Whitmore with the intention of eventually divorcing him for financial gain?" Victoria's lawyer whispered something to her. She took a breath and said, "Your Honor, I don't think my private conversations about hypothetical future scenarios are relevant to whether I'm a good mother." "Answer the question," Judge Morrison said. "Did you or did you not enter this relationship with intent to defraud Mr. Whitmore?" Silence. Victoria looked at her lawyer, who looked extremely uncomfortable. "Your Honor," the lawyer said, "I advise my client not to answer on the grounds that it may incriminate her in potential fraud proceedings." Judge Morrison's expression hardened. "I see. Well, in that case, my ruling is as follows. Emergency custody is granted to Mr. Whitmore. Ms. Ashford is to have no contact with the minor child, Emma Whitmore, pending a full hearing on termination of parental rights, which I'm scheduling for 3 weeks from today. Ms. Ashford will vacate Mr. Whitmore's residence immediately and will not come within 500 feet of Mr. Whitmore or the child. Violation of this order will result in arrest. Is that clear?" "Your Honor, this is excessive," Victoria's lawyer started. "This is a child's welfare we're discussing," Judge Morrison interrupted. "A child who has been emotionally neglected by a woman who admits, on camera, in her own words, that she feels nothing for the child and sees her only as a financial asset. I find that grounds for immediate protection. If Ms. Ashford wants to contest this ruling, she can do so at the full hearing. Until then, my order stands." The gavel came down, and just like that, Victoria was out of Emma's life. As Alexander left the courthouse with David, Victoria approached them in the hallway. Her perfect composure had cracked. Her eyes were red, her makeup smudged. "Alexander, please," she said. "Can we just talk? Alone." No, Alexander said. Anything you need to say can be said through lawyers. I'm sorry, Victoria said, and for the first time, she sounded genuine. I'm sorry for all of it. You're right, I never should have agreed to have Emma if I wasn't ready to be a real mother. I thought I could fake it, thought the feelings would come eventually. But they didn't, and instead of being honest, I just kept pretending. That was wrong. Yes, it was, Alexander said. And Emma paid the price for your deception. I know. Victoria wiped her eyes. For what it's worth, I do hope she has a good life. I hope she never knows what I said about her, what I thought about her. She deserves better than me. She does, Alexander agreed. So I'm going to make sure she has better. Goodbye, Victoria. He walked away, David beside him, leaving Victoria standing alone in the courthouse hallway. 3 weeks later, the full hearing took place. Victoria's attorney had clearly advised her that fighting was futile. She agreed to a voluntary termination of her parental rights in exchange for Alexander not pursuing fraud charges. The agreement stipulated that Victoria would receive a one-time payment of $500,000, far less than she'd have gotten in a divorce, but more than enough to start over. In return, she would sign away all parental rights to Emma, agree never to contact Emma or attempt to establish a relationship with her, and sign an NDA prohibiting her from discussing Emma publicly. Victoria signed the papers without a word. She looked at Alexander once, her expression unreadable, and then she was gone. That evening, Alexander sat in Emma's nursery, holding his daughter as she drifted off to sleep. She was safe now. Truly safe. No more Victoria. No more neglect. No more woman who saw her as a paycheck instead of a person. It's just you and me now, baby girl, Alexander whispered. You and me and Maria and Grandma Catherine. We're going to give you the best life. You're going to be so loved, Emma. So loved. Emma yawned and snuggled against his chest, completely trusting, completely content. Over the next few months, Alexander restructured his life around Emma. He cut back his hours at work, promoted a capable COO to handle day-to-day operations, and made himself available to be present for all of Emma's milestones. He also, with Maria's enthusiastic agreement, asked her to move into the penthouse full-time. You're not just Emma's nanny, Alexander told Maria. You're family. You've been there for her from the beginning, and I want to make sure you're always part of her life. Maria had cried and hugged him, accepting immediately. Within a week, she'd moved into the guest suite, and the penthouse became a real home for the first time. Catherine, Alexander's mother, visited every weekend. She doted on Emma, showered her with love, and never once said, "I told you so," about Victoria, though Alexander knew she was thinking it. You did the right thing, Catherine said one Sunday as they watched Emma play on her activity mat. That woman never loved her. And Emma deserves to be loved. She is loved, Alexander said. So much. Maybe not by the person I thought would love her, but by the people who matter. 6 months after Victoria left, Alexander received a Facebook friend request from a familiar name, Jennifer Morrison. It took him a moment to place it, Jennifer, Emma's surrogate. He accepted the request and received a message almost immediately. Hi Alexander, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I've been thinking about Emma a lot lately. I know our agreement was for no contact, but I was wondering if you'd be open to occasional updates? I'd love to know how she's doing. No pressure. I understand if you prefer to keep boundaries. But I carried her for 9 months, and I can't help but wonder about her. Let me know. Jennifer. Alexander stared at the message for a long time. Then he looked at Emma, now almost 18 months old, playing with blocks on the living room floor. She was babbling to herself, building a tower and knocking it down, completely absorbed. He thought about Victoria, who'd been legally Emma's mother but had never really wanted her. And he thought about Jennifer, who'd carried Emma, nurtured her for 9 months, brought her safely into the world, and then said goodbye. Alexander typed a response. Hi Jennifer, of course I don't mind. Emma is wonderful, healthy, happy, developing beautifully. She's walking now, saying about 20 words, and has the most infectious laugh. I'd be happy to send you updates and photos occasionally if you'd like. And Jennifer, thank you. Thank you for the gift you gave me. Emma is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Alexander. Jennifer's response came quickly. I'd love that. Thank you for being the kind of father every child deserves. That's all I wanted for her when I agreed to be her surrogate, for her to be loved unconditionally. It sounds like she is. That makes me so happy. Alexander set up a private photo album that Jennifer could access, updating it monthly with pictures and videos of Emma's milestones. Felt right somehow. Jennifer had wanted Emma to be loved, had carried her and cared for her before she was born. She deserved to know that Emma was thriving. One evening, about a year after Victoria had left, Alexander was putting Emma to bed when she said something that stopped his heart. Mama? Alexander froze. Emma had never called anyone Mama. Victoria had been gone before Emma was old enough to really talk. And while Emma was bonded with Maria, she called her Ria, a toddler approximation of Maria's name. What did you say, sweetheart? Alexander asked gently. Emma pointed to the photo on her nightstand, a picture of the day she was born, with Alexander holding her, beaming with joy. Next to him in the photo, smiling but looking slightly uncomfortable, was Victoria. Mama? Emma said again, pointing at Victoria. Alexander's throat tightened. He'd been dreading this moment, knowing it would come eventually. Emma would notice that other children had mothers. She would ask questions. He'd have to figure out how to explain, in age-appropriate terms, that her biological mother was still alive but had chosen not to be part of her life. But looking at Emma's innocent, questioning face, Alexander realized he didn't have to explain anything yet. Emma was only 18 months old. She didn't need the complicated truth. She just needed to know she was loved. That's Victoria, Alexander said gently. She helped bring you into the world. But you know who else loves you very, very much? Who? Emma asked, distracted from her original question. Daddy loves you. And Ria loves you. And Grandma loves you. So many people love you, Emma. You are so, so loved. Emma smiled and reached for her father. Love, Dada. I love you too, baby girl, Alexander said, holding her close. More than anything in the whole world. As Emma drifted off to sleep in his arms, Alexander made a decision. Tomorrow he would call his lawyer and start the process to legally change Emma's birth certificate. He would have Victoria's name removed as mother and have it listed as surrogate. Emma deserved to have accurate records, to know the truth of how she came into the world. And someday, when Emma was old enough to understand, Alexander would tell her the whole story. He'd tell her about Victoria, not with bitterness, but with honesty. He'd explain that sometimes people aren't ready to be parents, that sometimes people make mistakes, and that it's okay. He'd make sure Emma understood that Victoria's inability to love her wasn't Emma's fault, wasn't a reflection of Emma's worth. But he'd also tell Emma about all the people who did love her. About Maria, who'd cared for her from her first day home. About Grandma Catherine, who spoiled her and doted on her. About Jennifer, who'd carried her and brought her safely into the world and still cared enough to want updates on her life. And about Alexander himself, who loved her more than he'd ever thought it possible to love another human being. Emma would grow up knowing she was wanted, loved, and cherished. That was what mattered. Not the complicated circumstances of her birth, not the mother who'd failed her, but the family who'd chosen to love her unconditionally. 2 years later, Alexander stood in his living room watching Emma, now 3.5 years old, play with a little boy her age. The boy's mother, Sophia, sat on the couch next to Alexander, laughing at something Maria had said. Alexander had met Sophia at Emma's preschool 8 months ago. She was a single mother, a pediatrician, with a warmth and kindness that had immediately drawn him in. They'd started as friends, bonding over the challenges and joys of parenthood. Then, slowly, carefully, it had become something more. Emma really loves playing with Marcus, Sophia said, watching the children build a blanket fort. She talks about him constantly. Marcus is all Emma talks about too, Alexander said with a smile. Your son is very patient with her. She can be a bit bossy. She's enthusiastic, Sophia corrected diplomatically. That's different. Alexander laughed. He liked Sophia. More than liked her. She was genuine, kind, an excellent mother to Marcus. And most importantly, she genuinely cared about Emma. Not as a means to an end, not as a stepping stone to access Alexander's wealth, but as a person worthy of love and attention in her own right. They'd been dating for 4 months, taking things slowly, making sure Emma and Marcus were comfortable with the evolving relationship. So far, everything had been positive. The kids adored each other. Sophia fit seamlessly into their family dynamic with Maria and Catherine. "Have you thought any more about what we discussed?" Sophia asked quietly, glancing at the kids to make sure they were absorbed in their game. She was referring to their conversation last week about taking the next step, about Sophia and Marcus moving in, about blending their families officially. Alexander had been hesitant at first, gun-shy after the disaster with Victoria. But Sophia was nothing like Victoria. She'd been honest with him from the beginning about her life, her past, her intentions. She worked because she loved being a doctor, not because she needed his money. She had her own successful career. And most importantly, she loved Emma authentically. Alexander had watched her with his daughter over the past 8 months, and there was no doubt in his mind that Sophia's affection was genuine. "I have," Alexander said, "and I think I'm ready. If you are." Sophia's face lit up. "Really? Really? Let's do it. Let's be a family." That evening, after Sophia and Marcus had left, Alexander sat with Emma during her bedtime routine. "Daddy," Emma asked as Alexander brushed her teeth, "is Miss Sophia going to be my new mommy?" Alexander's heart clenched. "Would you like that? Would you like Miss Sophia to be your mommy?" Emma thought about it seriously. "She's nice. She reads good stories. And she makes Marcus share his cookies with me." Alexander laughed. "Those are all very good reasons to like someone." "I don't remember my other mommy," Emma said. "The one in the picture." "I know, baby. That's okay. Did she not want to be my mommy?" Here was the question Alexander had been preparing for, dreading, knowing would come. "It's complicated," Alexander said carefully. "She wasn't ready to be anybody's mommy. It wasn't about you, Emma. You were perfect. You are perfect. She just wasn't ready." "Oh." Emma processed this. "But Miss Sophia is ready?" "Yes," Alexander said. "Miss Sophia is very ready. She already loves you very much." "Good," Emma said decisively. "Then she can be my mommy. I love her too." It was that simple for a 3-year-old. And Alexander envied that simplicity even as he was grateful for it. 6 months later, Alexander and Sophia were married in a small, intimate ceremony with just close family and friends. Emma was the flower girl, taking her job very seriously as she scattered rose petals down the aisle. Marcus was the ring bearer, proudly carrying the rings on a small pillow. As Alexander and Sophia exchanged vows, Alexander found himself thinking about the hidden cameras he'd installed 3 years ago. The cameras that had revealed the ugly truth about Victoria and saved Emma from years of emotional neglect. He'd removed the cameras after Victoria left, no longer needing that level of surveillance. But he'd kept the footage, stored securely, just in case. Emma might want to see it someday, might want to understand what had really happened with her birth mother. Or she might not. She might be content with the family she had: Alexander, Sophia, Marcus, Maria, Grandma Catherine, and even Jennifer, who sent birthday cards and occasional gifts from afar. Either way, Alexander had done what he'd promised that day in Emma's nursery. He'd protected her. He'd given her a life filled with love and security and people who genuinely wanted her. The cameras had broken him. Watching Victoria's coldness and calculating manipulation had shattered Alexander's heart and his trust. But they'd also saved him. Saved Emma. Given them both a chance at the family they deserved. As Alexander kissed his bride and heard Emma and Marcus cheering, he thought, sometimes things have to break before they can be rebuilt stronger. His first attempt at family had been built on lies and manipulation. This one was built on truth, genuine affection, and love. And that made all the difference.